My name is Emily Tran. I'm 29 years old and I drive a rusty 2002 Toyota Corolla I bought for $700 on Craigslist. That car, squeaky brakes, no air conditioning, peeling paint, has been with me through 5 moves, 3 jobs, and more judgmental looks than I can count. To strangers, it's an old junker. To my extended family, it's a punchline. You see, in every family gathering, especially on holidays, my car became the subject of mockery. Oh my God, Emily, your car made it here. Is it held together by hope and duct tape? Are you starting a GoFundMe to get a new one? The worst part, they weren't strangers. They were Liam and Callie, my cousin and his wife, the golden couple, young, flashy, the kind of people who called their dog their child and named their Wi-Fi rich people only. They drove a Tesla, posted couple content daily, and lived in a big house that used to belong to my uncle, a house they proudly claimed was all thanks to working smart, not hard. They didn't know what I knew. They didn't know how deep their mortgage problems had gotten. They didn't know the foreclosure letters had started coming. They didn't know that I was the one who bought their mortgage, that their house now legally belonged to me. And when they laughed at me for showing up to Christmas in that rust bucket Corolla, they had no idea I had just paid $120,000 to quietly save them from losing everything. They mocked my car, not knowing they were laughing at their landlord. They had no idea, and I wasn't going to tell them. Not yet. You see, I didn't grow up with much. My parents were immigrants from Vietnam working night shifts and side hustles. My dad repaired vacuums out of the garage. My mom cleaned houses, often coming home with bleach burns on her fingers. We didn't complain. We didn't flash. We survived. And sometimes that meant driving things until they literally fell apart. I learned to save like it was a religion. My first job at 16 was at a grocery store. I didn't buy lattes. I packed lunch. I started reading about Roth IRAs at 18 while my classmates were discovering beer pong. When I got my first data analyst job after college, I didn't upgrade anything. I just funneled money into index funds and real estate. By 25, I had bought my first duplex. At 27, I had 5 properties under an LLC. I didn't take photos in front of sold signs. I didn't post stories about passive income. I just kept going. But none of that mattered when they looked at me, because all they could see was a rusted car. That car had a name, Daisy. I named her in college. She got me to work, to job interviews, to night classes. She waited outside rental showings while I wore my one nice blazer to convince agents I was a serious buyer. She was with me on the nights I cried after being underbid when tenants broke leases when the math didn't add up. Daisy didn't have Bluetooth, but she had loyalty. The only person in that whole backyard who ever knew any of this was Uncle Ben. Ben Miller was the black sheep of the Miller family, my mother's older brother, a wiry man with a smoker's voice and a surprising softness in his eyes. When my dad passed away suddenly when I was 14 and my mom fell into a deep depression, Ben would bring groceries every Sunday. He taught me how to fill out FAFSA forms. He even helped co-sign my first apartment in Portland when no one else would touch my credit history. So when I found out Uncle Ben was 3 months behind on his mortgage, I didn't think twice. I called the bank, got the details, and paid it off. No name attached. I just wanted him to keep the house the only home he'd ever known. That's the irony. While the rest of them laughed about my car, I had just saved the very roof over their heads. Because that house, the one he lived in, had been partially transferred to Liam and Callie when Uncle Ben fell sick last year. I knew it. I read the paperwork. They had taken control and then let it slide. They didn't even know it was almost foreclosed. They probably didn't check the mail, but I did, because Uncle Ben, even in his declining health, still trusted me with the truth. So as I stood there listening to Liam crack another joke, something about me being one tire blowout away from homelessness, I took another bite of potato salad and smiled, because I knew something they didn't. They laughed at a $700 car, not realizing the driver had just rescued their home. And that was the beginning. I wasn't supposed to outgrow them. That's how it always felt, like the Millers had an invisible ceiling they expected me to press up against, never through. I was the quiet one, the good girl, the scrappy cousin, never the successful one. Certainly not the wealthy one. But here's the truth. I've been playing a long game since I was 15. Back then, my parents and I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment above a liquor store. The walls were so thin you could hear arguments through the drywall, and the kitchen light flickered like a horror movie scene. My parents worked nights, my dad at a warehouse, my mom at a hotel laundry room, and I barely saw them except on Sundays. Money was a constant whisper in our house. Not loud or dramatic, just always there in the background. A silence before asking for new shoes. A pause before turning on the heater in winter. But there was one person who never made me feel poor Uncle Ben. He didn't have much either, but he had warmth. His house, even with its sagging porch and dusty curtains, always smelled like cinnamon and old books. It was a refuge. I'd go there after school sometimes just to escape the noise of everything. He had this way of talking to me like I mattered, like I wasn't just a kid with holes in her sneakers. One day I asked him why he always drove the same old pickup truck. He just smiled and said, "Because it still runs, and I don't need to impress anyone who doesn't love me already." That stuck with me. When I got my first paycheck from the grocery store, I didn't spend it. I opened a savings account and deposited $63. I still have the receipt from that day taped in my old journal. I kept saving. Quietly. Obsessively. I read financial blogs in secret, downloaded budgeting apps, and took free community college finance courses while my friends were clubbing on Fridays. I learned about compound interest before I ever got my first credit card. By 22, I had maxed out a Roth IRA. By 24, I had scrimped enough for a down payment on a duplex in a developing part of Portland. No one in my family knew. I didn't tell them because I knew what they'd say. They'd say I was lying, that it was luck, that I got help, which in a way I did. From books, from Uncle Ben, from my own damn discipline. Meanwhile, the Millers lived loudly. They flaunted leased BMWs and went on vacations to Italy just to recharge. Liam worked in tech sales, a good job, but unstable. Callie had a lifestyle blog that made her more influential than profitable, but they carried themselves like royalty. The turning point came 2 years ago when Uncle Ben got sick. He'd been quietly dealing with diabetes for years and ended up in the ER one night with chest pain. That's when I found out that he had refinanced his home to pay off medical bills and had added Liam as a co-owner. He said they'd take care of things if anything happened to me, Uncle Ben told me, voice gravelly over the phone. But I don't know, Emmy. I feel like I made a mistake. It crushed me. He trusted them because he didn't want to burden me, and they, with all their wealth and pretense, had done nothing but let the house rot. I started checking public records. Liam and Callie had stopped paying the mortgage almost a year ago. They assumed it was all automated or someone else's job. And Uncle Ben, he was too tired, too proud, and too sick to chase them. So I stepped in. I created an LLC. I funneled years of savings and real estate income into it. I called the bank, directly got the total owed, and wired every cent anonymously. It was the largest transaction I'd ever made. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on my floor knees, pulled up, staring at my laptop screen, wondering what Uncle Ben would say if he knew. But I didn't tell him. Not yet. I wanted him to rest, to feel safe, and I wanted to prove to myself, to the universe, that I could do this without applause. That wealth isn't something you scream about. It's something you wield quietly for the right people. So yes, I drove a rust bucket. Because every time I thought about getting a new car, I remembered that money is fuel, and I had places I wanted to go far beyond where a flashy vehicle could take me. The irony, I could have paid cash for a brand new Tesla that very day at the family reunion. Instead, I chose to keep Daisy, and in doing so, I chose to keep my power hidden. That day, as the Millers laughed at me from across the lawn, I realized something sharp and strange. I didn't care if they respected me anymore. I didn't need it, because I had done something they'd never understand. I had built a life no one could mock, even if they didn't know it yet. Still, I didn't expect the cruelty to escalate. I didn't think they'd push it so far that even my mother would start questioning me. I thought I was strong enough to brush it off. I was wrong. The moment it happened, it felt like the whole world had gone still, like even the wind held its breath to listen. The family reunion had moved into the evening. String lights flickered overhead. Kids chased each other with sticky fingers and melted popsicles. Someone pulled out a Bluetooth speaker playing 90s R&B, and the grill smoked with the last batch of hot dogs. I thought maybe, just maybe, I had survived the worst of it. I was standing by the picnic table refilling my mom's iced tea when I saw them all huddled around Liam's phone. His wife Callie, their friend Brendan, and two of our cousins Kim and Denise were laughing so hard they couldn't breathe. Then Callie shouted over the music, "Emily, come here." You have to see this, I should have known better, but I smiled politely and walked over. Liam held up his phone and turned the screen toward me. It was a mock GoFundMe page complete with a photo of my car taken from that afternoon. My car. Daisy. The headline read, "Let's help Emily upgrade from her Flintstones mobile," and the description, brutal, cruel. After years of enduring a prehistoric vehicle with a crank window and a natural AC system, aka a missing vent, our dear cousin Emily deserves better. Help her rejoin us in the 21st century. Let's get her something that doesn't scream trauma and tax evasion. They howled with laughter. I froze. Something inside me cracked not all at once, but like a windshield struck by a single pebble, slowly spidering out in every direction. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. That's actually not funny. Liam wiped a tear from his eye. Oh, come on, Em. Lighten up. It's just a joke. I looked around. My mother was standing nearby, her face flushed and eyes downcast. She didn't say a word. The worst part? No one did. Not one person said, "Hey, that's messed up." Not one person stopped to ask me how I felt. Not even Uncle Ben, but I knew why. He was tired, frail, and I didn't want to bring him into it. So I did what I always did. I smiled. A tight, practiced smile that said, "I'm fine. I'm used to this. I can take it." But later that night, when everyone had gone home and the lawn chairs were folded and the music was off, I sat in Daisy and cried. Ugly cried. The kind where your chest caves in and your breath comes in hiccups and you grip the steering wheel like it's the only thing keeping you tethered to the planet. It wasn't just a joke. It wasn't just about the car. It was about all the times I had swallowed their condescension, all the times I had pretended not to notice the eye rolls when I showed up in thrifted clothes or said I was still renting because I didn't want to explain how property ownership works through LLCs and trusts. It was about the fact that I had paid $120,000 to save a home that belonged in name at least to people who mocked me. And it was about my mom who had seen it all and said nothing. That night I drove home with the windows down. The air was cool and smelled like cedar. Daisy rattled over every bump like she was protesting the weight of the night. When I got home, I didn't go inside right away. I sat on the curb next to my car and looked at her, really looked at her. The faded paint, the rusted rims, the chipped headlight. She was hideous. She was beautiful. She was mine. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my investment tracker. 6 properties, 2 in Portland, 1 in Eugene, 3 in Tacoma, all rented out, all cash flow positive. I looked at my emergency fund, 8 months of expenses. I looked at my brokerage account, nearly 6 figures in ETFs. Then I looked at the photo on Liam's fake fundraiser again. I didn't laugh, but I didn't cry either, because I knew something he didn't. Every mile on Daisy was a mile toward freedom. Every dollar I didn't spend on a new car was a dollar that bought me another piece of the life I wanted. And the only reason they didn't understand that was because they couldn't see past the hood. They were judging the package. They never thought to ask what was inside. Still, something changed in me that night. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something quieter, colder, resolve. I decided I wasn't going to keep playing their game. They could laugh. They could post. They could roll their eyes. I had a plan now, one they would never see coming. And it started with a single sentence I whispered into the silence. You don't get to laugh at me and live in the house I saved. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan spinning shadows across my bedroom wall, thinking about the mock GoFundMe, the way Callie had cackled like it was the joke of the century, and the silence from the rest of my family. But what haunted me most was my mom's face. She'd been right there holding her iced tea with both hands like a nervous habit, her eyes avoiding mine. She didn't laugh, but she didn't defend me either. She just stood there frozen like a ghost at a crime scene. The next morning, I asked her carefully how she felt about the joke. Her answer sliced deeper than I expected. Maybe if you got a nicer car, they wouldn't tease you. I looked at her stunned. That's your takeaway? She shrugged but didn't meet my eyes. You work hard, you make good money, you don't have to live like you're still poor. That word hit me like a slap pour. She didn't say it with malice. She said it like a woman who had spent her entire life trying to claw her way out of poverty and couldn't understand why her daughter who had made it was still walking around in worn-out sneakers and driving a beater. She didn't understand that I wasn't doing it out of lack. I was doing it out of choice, out of strategy, out of the deep, hard-learned knowledge that money is freedom, not decoration. I just don't want them to look down on you, she whispered finally. They already do, I said quietly. We didn't speak much the rest of that morning. The weight of her disappointment was heavier than any of Liam's mockery, because for all the sacrifices she'd made, for all the hours she spent scrubbing other people's floors, this was what she wanted for me: comfort, ease, acceptance. And here I was, choosing to stand apart. It's funny how the things that make you strong can also make you lonely. For the next few weeks, I buried myself in work. I analyzed metrics for a company that sold wellness products. I sat in Zoom meetings with product managers and engineers and marketing teams. I smiled, I nodded, I met my deadlines, all while feeling like I was sinking into something heavy and invisible. I avoided family texts, ignored Callie's Instagram even when I saw she posted a video of that GoFundMe joke on her story with laughing emojis. I didn't comment, didn't reply, just blocked her, quietly. Without fanfare, Uncle Ben called me one night sounding worse than usual. I got a weird letter from the mortgage company, he said, coughing into the receiver. It said the loan was paid off, in full. I held my breath. Oh, I said lightly. That's good, right? They didn't say by who. But Emmy, was that you? I hesitated. Then I lied. No, Uncle. I wish it was, but it wasn't me. Maybe it was a government relief program or something. There was silence on the other end. He exhaled. Well, whoever did it, they saved my life. I was drowning. They gave me back my home. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You deserve peace, I said softly. Whoever it was probably just wanted to give you that. The call ended with him thanking me for listening, and I sat there on my couch clutching my phone to my chest like it could anchor me to the truth I wasn't ready to tell. I didn't want credit. I really didn't. But I did want respect. And no matter how many properties I owned or spreadsheets I optimized or tenants I screened, my family still saw me as the girl who lived like a student, the girl who wouldn't even buy a real purse, the girl who could be laughed at without consequence. That night I wrote in my journal a habit I'd kept since I was 16. They mock the rust. They don't know about the gold buried underneath. They don't see the deeds, the wire transfers, the tax strategies. They don't know I'm playing chess while they're posing with checkers. I paused, then added, but I'm done playing nice. I'm done letting them step over my silence. It was the first time I admitted it to myself. I wanted to be seen. Not for my car, not for my clothes, but for the empire I'd built with no help, no shortcuts, and no applause. And then something strange happened. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my property manager in Tacoma. One of the tenants had just moved out. The other half of the duplex had been rented to, of all people, Callie's sister Amber. She had no idea I owned the building. It was listed under my LLC, completely anonymous. I stared at the email confirmation and laughed for the first time in weeks, because suddenly poetic justice wasn't just a concept, it was a lease agreement. I could have canceled it. I could have raised the rent, evicted her, let her know exactly who was in charge. But I didn't. Instead, I filed that information away like a sharp, gleaming knife in a drawer. Because the Millers weren't just about to lose their image of me, they were about to find out what happens when you underestimate the girl with the rust bucket. It's one thing to be mocked. It's another to watch the same people who belittled you stumble into the very world you've quietly built, clueless and exposed. When I found out that Amber Callie's sister had moved into one of my Tacoma properties, I didn't feel angry. I felt ready. Ready to stop hiding. ready to stop apologizing for living with purpose, ready to shift the narrative not by clapping back, not by proving myself to anyone, but by letting my actions speak loud and clear. The universe, it seemed, had just opened a door, and I wasn't going to let it close. I started by reviewing every lease I owned, all 6 properties, looking for overlap, vulnerability, or opportunity. I wasn't thinking like Emily the cousin anymore. I was thinking like Emily the landlord, the investor, the strategist. And then it happened. Another email. This one from my property manager in Beaverton, the newest property I'd bought just outside Portland. A foreclosure deal I picked up quietly a few months back and renovated using my cash reserves. The former owner, Uncle Ben. He had quietly signed over the deed to Liam and Callie last year as a future inheritance, too sick to realize the pressure they were under themselves. And now Liam had missed 5 payments in a row. The mortgage had already gone into default again. My payment had wiped the debt clean, but they hadn't paid a single cent toward taxes or insurance since. The house was technically theirs, but held in a complicated trust that listed me as the silent lion holder. They didn't even know I existed in the paperwork. But I did. And the terms were clear: if the property wasn't brought current and the taxes weren't paid by the next cycle, full legal ownership would revert to the lion holder, me. I printed out the documents and stared at them for an hour. I could do this. I could claim the house. I could legally become their landlord. At first, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with that power. Revenge, validation. Or maybe just a kind of poetic completion to the years of swallowing every rude comment, every side-eyed glance, every joke about my car and my lifestyle and my weird savings obsession. But the truth was, I didn't feel vengeful. I felt calm, like I was finally standing in the middle of a storm I'd spent a decade preparing for. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about me. About reclaiming the parts of myself I had buried so deeply in silence and strategy. The next week, I called Uncle Ben. He sounded better, stronger. "Emmy," he said, "you got time for coffee this weekend? I'd love to see you." We met at a quiet cafe near his house. He looked thinner, but his eyes were alert, full of life. I brought him a cinnamon roll just like I used to when I was little. He smiled. "You remember?" "Always," I said, taking a seat. We talked for an hour about everything but the house, about music and old movies and how he was starting to write his memoir. But near the end, his voice dropped to a lower register. "I know it was you," he said gently. I looked up. "The mortgage," he added. "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone. But I know." I felt my throat tighten. "I just wanted you to be okay," I said. "You were the only one who ever believed in me." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I still do." I didn't cry then. I waited until I got back to my car. I sat behind the wheel of Daisy and let the tears fall silently, the kind that wash something clean inside you. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to evict Liam and Callie. I was going to take control of the house legally, silently, and offer them a lease. A real one. With fair rent. Clear boundaries, and my name at the top, not to humiliate them, but to remind myself of what power really looks like. Power isn't screaming. Look at me, it's standing in the storm untouched, while others scramble for cover. It's being mocked for driving a $700 car and knowing quietly fully that you could buy 5 brand new ones without blinking. It's choosing mercy when no one gave it to you. I began the process with my attorney. The paperwork was clean, the clock was ticking, the property was mine to claim, and within 30 days it would be. Meanwhile, I kept driving Daisy. I kept wearing my same 3 work blazers. I kept meal prepping my lunches and collecting dividends and showing up to real estate meetups in secondhand jeans. Because my value was never in how I looked, it was in what I built. And the next time my family saw me, I wasn't going to tell them anything. I was just going to show up with the same rust bucket they laughed at and the title to their house in my bag. 30 days passed in a blur of legal forms, e-signatures, and long, quiet nights filled with both adrenaline and guilt. I read every line of the property agreement, triple-checked every condition. The trust had been airtight and neglected. Uncle Ben had done what he thought was best at the time, trusting Liam and Callie to keep things up. But they didn't, and now the terms were clear. The house legally belonged to me. It was surreal. On paper, it was just one more property in the portfolio. A mid-sized 3-bedroom colonial with a weathered porch and a cherry tree in the front yard. But emotionally, it was the house where I learned to ride a bike. The house where Uncle Ben taught me how to play chess, where I spent snow days drinking hot cocoa while my mom was out working. And now it was mine. The irony was almost cinematic. So I did what I always do when things feel too big. I made a spreadsheet. I ran the numbers, calculated the fair market rent, compared neighborhood rates, included depreciation and taxes. I treated it like any other property because that's what it had become, an asset, not a battleground. Still, when I drafted the lease agreement, I paused before typing in the tenant names Liam Miller and Callie Miller. It was like watching two worlds collide: the financial life I had built with such deliberate strategy and the social life I had always kept hidden. One had always been my protection from the other, but now they were in the same cell. My lawyer arranged for the lease to be delivered via certified mail, complete with a cover letter explaining the transfer of ownership, the terms of tenancy, and the required response window. I didn't sign the letter with my personal name. I signed it under my LLC, Tran Growth and Equity LLC. Simple, professional, impersonal. Let the information speak for itself. I expected anger, denial, maybe even silence. What I didn't expect was a phone call from Callie at 10:42 p.m. the night they received the letter. I stared at the caller ID for a long time. I almost didn't answer. But I did. Hello. There was a pause. Then, is this Emily? Her voice was shaking. It wasn't her usual syrupy tone, the influencer voice she used when filming herself making matcha lattes. It was raw, uneven. Yes, I said calmly. There was another pause. We just got this letter, this lease. From some company? Is this real? Yes. Are you the owner? Yes. Silence. I don't understand, she whispered. How? When I've owned the lien on the house for 3 months, I said. The title transferred when the mortgage defaulted. You didn't respond to the notices and the terms were clear. She let out a choked noise. But it's Uncle Ben's house, and he gave it to you, I said evenly. You were responsible for it, and you let it slide. We didn't mean to, I know, I said. That's why I didn't evict you. There was another long silence. You're letting us stay. You'll sign the lease. You'll pay rent, market rate. No more missed payments, no more excuses. She didn't respond. I could hear Liam in the background asking who she was talking to. She didn't answer him. Why, she asked finally. Why would you do this? There, it was the question. I could have said a dozen things. Because I'm better than you. Because you mocked me. Because you laughed at my car while living in a house I quietly saved. But I didn't say any of that. I simply said, because Uncle Ben deserves better than watching his home fall apart. And because I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to protect what he built. Then I ended the call. I turned off my phone. I climbed into bed. And for the first time in months, I slept soundly. The next week, they signed the lease. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just a signature, trembling and small, in the bottom right corner of the PDF. And suddenly I was their landlord. The girl with the rusted car. The girl they laughed at. The girl who now owned their home. It wasn't vengeance. It was truth. And it tasted better than any victory I could have planned. But I wasn't finished yet, because I had one more appearance to make, one final quiet confrontation. And I knew exactly what I was going to wear. The same faded jeans, the same $20 thrift store jacket, and I was driving Daisy, because the car they laughed at was the one that delivered them mercy. I pulled into the driveway of the house they once mocked me from, Daisy clunking over the gravel like always, slow, steady, impossible to ignore. The porch light was on. The blinds twitched as I parked. I knew they saw me. Part of me thought they'd come outside right away. They didn't. I stepped out of Daisy, smoothed down the front of my thrifted jacket, and reached into my bag. The lease agreement, a copy for my records, stamped, finalized, real. It was a strangely warm day for October, the kind of warmth that pretends summer isn't over even though the leaves say otherwise. I stood on the porch for a moment and just looked around. The cherry tree out front had started to go bare, its last few yellow leaves clinging on like they hadn't made peace with change. The wind rustled through them, softly whispering. I knocked. Callie answered. She didn't say anything at first. Her makeup-free face was blotchy, her hair pulled into a messy bun. The woman who once ridiculed me in front of half the family now stood frozen like a child caught cheating on a test. Behind her, I saw Liam pacing. He stopped when he saw me. Emily, he said flatly. I nodded. Hi. Silence. I just wanted to drop off a copy of the lease. Signed and finalized, I said, handing it to Callie. She took it like it might burn her fingers. You didn't have to come in person, she mumbled. I know, I replied. But I wanted to. They didn't ask why. Maybe they didn't want to hear it. Maybe they already knew. I glanced inside. The house was tidy but dim, the kitchen sink full of dishes, the table covered in unopened mail and Amazon packages. It looked like what it was, a life spiraling quietly. And then I saw Uncle Ben's photo on the wall. It made my chest tighten. He was smiling in it, holding a fishing pole. I remember that day I was 8. He caught a trout and made a whole show of pretending it was a shark. We laughed until we cried. He was proud of this place, I said softly. It meant a lot to him. Callie looked at the photo but said nothing. I know things are awkward right now, I continued. But I want you to understand something. They both looked up. This house isn't about me being better than you. It's not a punishment. It's not revenge. Liam folded his arms. Then what is it? I met his eyes. It's protection. For Uncle Ben's legacy. For a home that should have never been at risk. For the people who didn't step up when it mattered. He flinched. I didn't. I won't raise the rent without notice. I won't treat you unfairly. But I expect responsibility. You're not entitled to this house. You're renting it. From me. And from now on, that's exactly how this works. Callie's eyes welled up. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Instead, she just whispered, Okay. I nodded once and turned to go. I made it back to Daisy, reached for the driver's side handle, and paused. Then I turned around. One more thing, I said loud enough for them to hear. They both looked up. I gestured toward my car. You remember the GoFundMe joke? Liam looked down. Callie looked like she might cry. This car paid for your mortgage, I said simply. Every mile. Every dollar I saved by not upgrading, by living below my means, by doing what you thought was pathetic. It gave me the power to save your home. I opened the door, sat down in the driver's seat. I don't need an apology, I added, but I do need respect. Then I shut the door. Daisy roared to life on the third try, like always. And as I pulled away, I saw them in the rearview mirror, still standing in the doorway, stunned, small, and silent. Not because I had humiliated them, but because I had done the one thing they couldn't comprehend. I had won without raising my voice, without revenge, without changing who I was. And that was the loudest message of all. It had been 2 months since I handed them the lease. 2 months since the quiet shift. 2 months since they began living in the house they no longer owned under the name they once mocked. I didn't hear from Liam or Callie after that day. No calls, no messages. Rent arrived on time, wired through the property manager. No late payments, no excuses. Nothing. It was perfect, and perfectly hollow. Because the truth is, I didn't want revenge. I wanted something I'd never quite had with my extended family: mutual respect. I wasn't naive enough to expect closeness anymore, but I still wanted to believe it was possible to exist in the same space without pretending I was less. That hope was tested sooner than I expected. "Emily, we're hosting Christmas this year," my mom said one Sunday over dinner between bites of stir-fried bok choy. "Can you come?" I paused. She meant at her house. The house she rented in the suburbs. Small, warm, full of the scent of fish sauce and familiar old furniture. But I knew what she really meant. The whole family was coming, including Liam, including Callie. And I had a choice: to avoid it to protect my peace, or to show up and reclaim my place. I said yes, because I didn't work this hard to live in the shadows of people who never bothered to know the truth. I arrived at my mom's house on Christmas Eve wearing a simple gray sweater, black jeans, and the same coat I'd worn the day I handed over the lease. No designer labels, no flashy entrance. And yes, I drove Daisy. The driveway was packed with SUVs and crossovers. I parked at the curb like I always did and walked the short path to the front door. Inside, the noise was loud holiday music, children screaming, the rustle of wrapping paper and tinsel. The Millers were already there. Callie saw me first. Her smile faltered just a little, but she held it. "Emily," she said. "Hey." "Hey," I replied, calm. Liam turned. His face was unreadable. We stood like that for a moment, the girl with the rust bucket and the man living under her roof, surrounded by tinsel and awkward silence. Then something surprising happened. He stepped forward. "I've been meaning to talk to you," he said quietly, almost like a confession. I waited. "I was an ass," he admitted. We both were. Callie looked down, ashamed. "We thought we were being funny." I nodded slowly. "You weren't," I know Liam said. "And I'm sorry." The words didn't undo everything, but they mattered. Not because they were perfect, but because they were real. I appreciate that I said, "Truly." He took a breath. "I had no idea you owned all that you'd saved the house." "You didn't have to. I didn't do it for you," I replied. He nodded again, this time with humility. "I know. But thank you." Callie stepped forward. "You don't have to talk to us if you don't want to. But we wanted you to know we're trying to do better, be better." I looked at them, really looked at them. They weren't mocking anymore. They weren't laughing. They were learning. "I don't want anything from you," I said. "Just to pay rent, stay honest. And next time you see someone driving a beater car, remember that you might be looking at someone who could buy your whole block." Callie actually laughed softly but sincerely. "Fair," she said. Later that night, as we all gathered around the dinner table, something shifted. For the first time, no one joked about Daisy. No one asked why I wasn't married or hinted that I should treat myself to a new wardrobe. No one tried to define me. They just let me be. It was strange, peaceful, earned. I watched my mom laugh with her cousins, watched the kids tear through their presents, watched the lights flicker across old family photos on the wall, and I realized something. I had broken the cycle, not with shouting, not with shame, but with strategy, discipline, and an unshakable belief in myself. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small at the table. I felt equal, no more than that. I felt seen. A few days after Christmas, I found myself walking the same old path in Uncle Ben's neighborhood, just like I used to as a teenager. The winter sun was low and soft, casting long shadows over the cracked sidewalks and sagging fences. There was something about the way the cold settled on your skin there, familiar, almost nostalgic. I hadn't seen Uncle Ben since early fall, but I'd been checking in with his nurse and sending groceries every 2 weeks. His health was still fragile but steady. The day was quiet and I needed closure, a conversation. When I knocked, it took him a minute to get to the door. He opened it with a smile, his cardigan buttoned wrong, his cane leaning against the wall. "Emmy girl," he said with a grin. "Was wondering when you'd stop by." He always called me that Emmy girl, like I was still 10 carrying around a backpack twice my size. We sat in his small, warm living room. He poured me tea, the cheap kind in the red box, with too much sugar, just how I liked it. No cinnamon rolls this time, just stories. He already knew everything. I talked to your mom, he said with a twinkle in his eye. She told me about Christmas. You handled it like a queen. I handled it like a tired woman who's had enough of being the joke. He chuckled. Same thing, isn't it? We talked about the lease, the house, the way Liam and Callie were actually paying on time now. How Callie had started a small side gig doing design consulting. How Liam had cut back on the flashy tech stuff and taken on a less glamorous but steadier position. They're scared, I said, but they're also quieter. They're learning, Uncle Ben said, and sometimes people need to lose something to realize what they had. I nodded, then paused. Do you think I was too harsh? He looked at me long and slow, his old hands wrapped around his teacup, like it was something sacred. No, he said. You were firm. That's different. But I let them live there. I didn't kick them out. Part of me still wonders if I should have made a bigger point. Uncle Ben smiled. You already did. You didn't use your power to hurt. You used it to hold the line. That sat with me. Deep. Because that was the real lesson, wasn't it? Power isn't about proving people wrong. It's about protecting what's right. And I had protected him, his legacy, myself. Even if no one had clapped for it, even if no one ever would. He reached over and patted my hand. You know that house. It was never about the structure. It was about the heart in it. You kept that alive. I swallowed hard. In that moment, I realized I didn't need an apology from everyone who'd hurt me. I didn't need a viral post or a standing ovation. I had already won because I had stayed true to the girl who opened her first savings account with $63 and a dream. That girl didn't want revenge. She wanted freedom. And she'd found it. On the drive home, I rolled down Daisy's window. The cold wind rushed in sharp and clear. The dashboard squeaked with every bump. The radio knob still didn't work. And I smiled, because I wouldn't trade her for the world. She carried every decision I made, every mile, every sacrifice, every quiet no to what looked good, and every louder yes to what felt right. She wasn't a car. She was a mirror, a testament, a reminder that just because they don't see your value doesn't mean it isn't there. And when I parked outside my condo that night, I sat in the driveway a little longer, listening to the ticking of her engine cooling down, thinking about every person who had underestimated me, and how I'd built everything they never thought I could. I didn't set out to prove anything to anyone, not to Liam, not to Callie, not even to my mom who thought a nice car would have protected me from the world's judgment. All I ever wanted was to live on my own terms, quietly, sustainably, and with dignity. And somewhere along the way, in the slow and steady hum of engine trouble and rent payments and quiet tea with Uncle Ben, I became exactly the woman I needed to be. But the final lesson didn't come until a month after New Year's when I got a letter in the mail. It was from Callie. Handwritten, no stickers, no perfume. Just white envelope blue ink and her very careful cursive. Emily, I don't expect you to respond to this. I just want you to know something I used to think money was about image, about status, about being seen. And you made me realize it's about freedom, about safety. You didn't humiliate us when you had every right to. You gave us the chance to be better. And I don't think I ever said thank you. So thank you. For the roof. For the mercy, for the lesson. I hope one day when I've earned it we can talk again as equals. Callie, I read that letter 3 times. Not because I needed her words, but because they confirmed something I'd long suspected but hadn't dared believe. When you stand in quiet integrity long enough, even the loudest doubters start to hear you. That same week, I found a message from Liam in my inbox. I've been following your real estate blog. I had no idea you'd built all of that. I'd love to learn from you. I know I've got a long way to go, but if you ever have time, maybe coffee. I didn't respond. Not yet, because forgiveness is one thing, but trust that comes slow, earned, like wealth, like healing. Still, I didn't delete the message either, because maybe this wasn't just a story about being underestimated. Maybe it was a story about evolution, about becoming something different than what they expected, and about giving people the space to grow too. Uncle Ben passed away quietly the following spring, peaceful, at home, in the house that, because of one silent decision, never had to be sold or stripped down. At the funeral, Liam came over to me. He didn't say much, just a small, solemn nod. But Callie hugged me, tight, real, like someone who had finally stopped seeing me as the poor cousin with the beater and started seeing me as a woman who chose a different path and owned every inch of it. After everyone left, I walked back to Daisy sitting exactly where I'd parked her on the curb. A little more rust on the side now, a new squeak in the back seat. But she still ran, and she still carried everything I stood for. I ran my fingers along the edge of the hood and smiled, because I knew who I was, and I knew what I had done. They mocked me for my $700 car, not knowing I was silently saving them from foreclosure, not knowing I had already bought my freedom with every no they laughed at, not knowing I was their landlord, but I knew. And that was enough. I got in, turned the key, and let Daisy rumble to life. No applause, no headlines, just me, and the sound of a woman driving away in full control of her story.